The wealthiest man in Seoul's
I don't
underworld
have the
sat in
money
a
to pay our
rain-drenched
bills.
Atlanta diner,
no.
dressed like a
What are
man
we
who'd
gonna
lost
do?
everything. To the
I
waitress
don't have the
refilling
money for the
lukewarm
bill.
coffee, he was
Oh,
just another
okay,
immigrant
we'll
whose
figure
luck
it
had
out.
run
I'm
out.
so sorry.
She had no idea that beneath the faded thrift store jacket, Kim Gwon was watching, waiting, testing. He leaned across the sticky formica table, studying the woman sitting opposite him. Rose. She was radiant. Honey brown waves framing a face too kind for a city this cold, eyes that held warmth despite whatever struggles had brought her to a 24-hour diner on a Tuesday night. The waitress slapped down a check for $18. Gawan made a show of patting his pockets, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion to dawning horror. I I think I left my wallet at the apartment, he stammered, his voice laced with practiced desperation. He looked down at the worn tabletop, unable to meet her eyes. I'm so sorry, Rose. I thought I had enough for us. He waited for the inevitable, the polite excuse, the checking of her phone, the slow withdrawal of interest when a man couldn't even afford an $18 meal. In his world, value was measured in power and money. He expected her to see a broke man and see nothing worth her time. Instead, he watched her reach into a small purse that had seen better days. She pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, the only thing inside except for a worn student ID and a single house key. For a brief moment, her fingers tightened around it, and he saw something flicker across her face. Not hesitation, calculation. She was counting the cost of getting home, he realized, weighing her own needs against his humiliation. Then her face softened into that smile again. Don't worry about it, Giwan, Rose whispered, placing the bill on the table and sliding it toward the waitress. Her hand covered his for just a moment, warm, certain, real. I've got you. It's just $20. She turned to the waitress. Keep the change for the gentleman, and could you box up that sandwich for him? For later? Inside that broke man, something cracked. For a man who'd survived street wars and hostile takeovers in Seoul's underworld, who'd learned to trust no one and expect betrayal from everyone, he realized in that moment that his greatest challenge wouldn't be his enemies back home. It would be the crushing weight of guilt for lying to the only person who had ever looked at his soul when he pretended to have nothing and found it worth saving. But there was one problem Giwan hadn't calculated. While he was testing Rose's heart, the monsters from his past were pulling up outside in a black SUV. And they didn't care who paid the bill. What happens when Rose walks out into the rain with no bus fare and Giwan realizes his test has put her in deadly danger? Hello, welcome to Seoul Africa Stories. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello and know how far our story is reaching. 2 hours before the diner, Kim Gi-won stood in front of a full-length mirror in the penthouse suite of Atlanta's most exclusive hotel, watching himself disappear. The $5,000 Tom Ford suit came off first. Then the Patek Philippe watch, worth more than most people earned in a year. The Italian leather shoes, the platinum cufflinks engraved with his family crest. One by one, he stripped away the armor of wealth until he was just a man in expensive undergarments, staring at the intricate tattoos that covered his chest and arms like a roadmap of violence. Those he couldn't remove. The ink was permanent, a visual record of every territory claimed, every rival eliminated, every promise made in blood. Dragons coiled around his forearms. Cherry blossoms bloomed across his shoulders, each petal representing a life taken. On his chest, directly over his heart, was the character for loyalty in Old Korean script, put there by his father the day Gi-won took his first life at 17. He pulled on the clothes his assistant had acquired from a Goodwill store in the rougher part of town. Faded jeans with a small tear at the knee, a flannel shirt that had been washed so many times the blue had turned gray, a jacket that smelled faintly of mothballs and someone else's cigarette smoke, work boots that were scuffed and worn but still functional. In the mirror, the dragon of soul vanished. In his place stood someone who looked tired, ordinary, forgettable. Boss, are you certain about this? Min Jun, his head of security, stood by the door, his face tight with concern. We still haven't identified the leak in the organization. Going out there alone without protection. That's exactly why I need to do this, Giwan interrupted, running a hand through his hair. Even that felt different without the expensive styling products. Everyone I meet knows who I am. They see the money, the power, the reputation. They want something from me before I even open my mouth. He thought of Ji-yeon, the woman he'd almost married last year. Beautiful, sophisticated, cultured. She'd loved the penthouse, the private jets, the jewelry. When he'd asked her what she loved about him, she'd look confused, as if the question itself was nonsensical. How could you separate the man from what he owned? This woman, Rose. Min Jun ventured carefully. You met her only once, at that charity gala for international students. Are you sure she's worth this risk? Giwan remembered that night 3 weeks ago. He'd been there as a favor to a business associate, bored out of his mind, counting the minutes until he could leave. Then he'd seen her across the room, not networking with the wealthy donors like the other students, but standing alone by the windows, staring out at the city lights with an expression of such raw longing that it had stopped him in his tracks. He'd approached her, introduced himself with a fake name, Ji-hoon, a graduate student studying business. She'd smiled at him, that incredible warm smile, and asked him what he was running from. The question had been so unexpected, so perceptive, that he'd actually laughed. They'd talked for 2 hours, about everything and nothing. She told him about Lagos, about her family, about her dreams of becoming a doctor so she could go back home and open a clinic in her neighborhood. He told her half-truths about Seoul, about feeling disconnected from his family, about wondering if there was more to life than the path laid out for him. When he'd asked for her number, she'd hesitated. I don't really date, she'd said softly. School is expensive, and I work 2 jobs, and I'm tired most of the time. I don't have anything left over for this. He'd promised to keep it simple. 1 dinner, nothing fancy, just a chance to talk more. She'd said yes, but only if they could meet somewhere close to campus, somewhere cheap. She'd laughed when she said it, but he'd heard the truth underneath. She couldn't afford anything else. So he'd agreed. And now here he was, about to take the charade further than he'd ever taken it before. She's worth finding out, Giwan said finally, pulling the cheap jacket closed. If she's like all the others, I'll know within an hour. If she's different. He trailed off, not wanting to voice the desperate hope that kept him up at night. The hope that somewhere in this world, someone existed who could see past the surface to whatever remained of his humanity. Minjun sighed. I'll have teams positioned around the diner. Discreet. If anything happens, nothing will happen, Giwan said with more confidence than he felt. It's just dinner. The rain started as Giwan's taxi pulled up to the address Rose had given him, a 24-hour diner called Martha's that looked like it had been serving the same coffee since 1985. Neon signs flickered in the window, open late, breakfast all day, coffee 99 cents. Through the rain-streaked glass, he could see her already waiting in a booth near the back. Even from here, even in this terrible lighting, she took his breath away. Rose wore a simple dress, dark, floral, nothing expensive, but somehow elegant on her. Her hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and she had a textbook open in front of her, a yellow highlighter in her hand. As he watched, she rubbed her eyes tiredly, then bent back over the book with fierce determination. Giwan took a breath and pushed through the door. A bell chimed overhead. She looked up immediately, and her face transformed. That smile again, genuine, delighted, as if his arrival was the best thing that had happened to her all day. She closed the textbook and stood, smoothing down her dress self-consciously. Ji-hoon, you made it! She gestured to the booth. I'm sorry about the location. I know it's not much, but they have really good pie, and it's close to the bus stop I need for my shift later. She stopped, seeming to realize she was rambling. I'm glad you came. Of course I came. Giwan slid into the booth across from her, hyper-aware of every detail. The way she'd pushed her textbook aside without marking her place, abandoning her studying for him. The faint shadows under her eyes that spoke of exhaustion. the careful way she'd positioned herself, leaning forward with genuine interest. I've been looking forward to this all week. That, at least, was true. A waitress appeared, middle-aged, tired, with a name tag that read Donna. "What can I get you kids?" Rose looked at him expectantly, and Giwan realized he was supposed to order first. In his world, subordinates ordered while he waited. In this world, apparently, men went first. "Just coffee, please," he said. "Black." "I'll have the same," Rose added, then paused. "Actually, could I also get a side of toast? I haven't eaten since this morning." The waitress scribbled on her pad and walked away. Giwan felt something twist in his chest. She was hungry. She'd been sitting here studying, hungry, waiting for him. "Long day?" he asked. "You could say that." Rose laughed, but it sounded strained. "I had class at 8, then my shift at the library until 3, then my clinical observation at the hospital until 7. I should probably be sleeping right now, but I have an exam on Friday, and I'm so behind." "Clinical observation? You're in medical school?" "Pre-med," she corrected, her eyes lighting up. "Second year. It's brutal, honestly. Sometimes I wonder why I'm doing this to myself." Then her expression softened. "But then I remember my grandmother. She died from something completely preventable, an infection that could have been stopped with basic antibiotics. But the clinic in our neighborhood didn't have them, and the hospital was too expensive, and by the time someone figured out how to help her, it was too late." She looked down at her hands. "I don't want that to happen to anyone else. So I study, and I work, and I tell myself it'll be worth it when I'm finally a doctor." Jiwan had ordered the deaths of men for lesser offenses than what had killed her grandmother. In his world, problems were solved with money or violence, usually both. But sitting here, listening to her talk about saving lives instead of taking them, he felt the vast chasm between their realities. "That's remarkable," he said quietly. "Your grandmother would be proud." "I hope so." Rose smiled at him, and he noticed for the first time that she had a small dimple in her left cheek. "But enough about me. Tell me about you. How's the business program going?" And so he lied. He told her about imaginary classes, invented professors, fictional struggles with accounting homework. She listened with such genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, laughing at his stories, that he almost forgot he was performing. The coffee came. Then the toast, which Rose ate slowly, savoring each bite in a way that made him suspect it might be her only meal today. They talked about everything: her favorite books, his memories of Seoul, her frustration with Atlanta's public transportation, his love of old movies. An hour passed, then another. The diner slowly emptied as the night grew later. Donna refilled their coffee cups twice, looking increasingly impatient. Finally, Giwan looked at his watch, the cheap digital one he'd bought specifically for tonight, and pretended to be surprised. "I should probably let you get to that studying. Do you want to get some actual food before I go? My treat." Rose hesitated, and he saw her glance at the clock on the wall. "I really should get home. I have to be at the library by 6 tomorrow morning." "One burger," he pressed. "You need to eat something more than toast." She wavered, then smiled. "Okay, but something cheap. I know student budgets." He ordered 2 burgers and fries, and when they arrived, he watched her eat with barely concealed hunger. Guilt crawled up his throat. Here she was, genuinely struggling, sharing a meal with someone she thought was in the same situation, while he had millions sitting in accounts around the world. They finished eating, talking more softly now, the conversation turning deeper. She told him about her father, who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for her undergraduate degree before dying of a heart attack 2 years ago. He told her about his own father, carefully editing out the criminal empire and the weight of expectations that had shaped his entire life. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's story?" Rose asked suddenly. "Like the life you have isn't really yours?" Giwan froze. It was as if she could see straight through him, past the disguise, past the lies, into the truth he'd been hiding from everyone, including himself. "Every day," he admitted, and it was the most honest thing he'd said all night. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Then we'll have to figure out our real stories together." Donna appeared at their table, slapping down the check with enough force to make the salt shaker jump. Whenever you're ready, Han. Giwan picked up the small slip of paper. $18. In his real life, he spent more than that on a single cup of coffee. He reached for his pocket, then stopped. This was it, the moment of truth. He patted his jacket pockets, his jeans pockets, his jacket again, more frantically this time. The blood drained from his face in what he hoped looked like genuine panic. No, he muttered. No, no, no. What's wrong? Rose leaned forward, concern immediate in her voice. My wallet. He looked up at her, letting distress flood his features. I think I must have left it at the apartment. I thought I grabbed it, but... He patted his pockets again, the motion increasingly desperate. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He could see her processing this, her mind working through the implications. They'd just eaten $18 worth of food. Donna was standing by the register, arms crossed, clearly at the end of her patience. Outside, the rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the windows. This was the test. This was when she would see him as a burden, as someone who'd wasted her time and couldn't even handle basic adult responsibilities. This was when she would make an excuse, perhaps offer to pay this time, but make it clear there wouldn't be a next time. But Rose didn't do any of those things. Instead, she opened her small purse, the one he'd noticed earlier, barely large enough for the essentials. She pulled out a wrinkled $20 bill, and as she did, something else fell out onto the table. A bus schedule, with several routes highlighted. He saw her look at the schedule, then at the 20, then at him. Saw the moment she made her choice. Let me pause here for a moment. Please use this opportunity to like, subscribe, and also tell me in the comments where you're watching this story. Don't worry about it, Jahoon, she said softly, and her voice held no judgment, no irritation, just simple kindness. I've got you. It's just $20. She caught Donna's attention, holding up the bill. Keep the change for the gentleman, please. Donna's expression softened slightly as she took the money. You want boxes for anything? Yes, please. Could you box up half of his burger and the rest of the fries? For later. Rose smiled at the waitress, then turned back to Giwan. You should take something home. Long night of studying ahead of you, right? Giwan couldn't speak. His throat had closed up entirely. In his world, kindness came with strings attached. Generosity was an investment, expecting returns. People gave only when they wanted something back. But Rose had just given him her last $20. Money she clearly needed. Money that, according to that bus schedule, was probably supposed to get her home, and she was smiling at him as if she'd won the lottery instead of sacrificing something vital. Rose, he managed, his voice rough. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She was gathering up her textbook and highlighter, preparing to leave. Besides, you would have done the same for me. I know you would. She believed that. She actually believed that a struggling graduate student she'd met only twice would sacrifice for her the way she'd just sacrificed for him. The faith in her eyes was almost painful to witness. Donna returned with a styrofoam container and handed it to Rose, who passed it to Giwan. Don't forget this. He took the box, still unable to process what had just happened. Outside, the rain showed no signs of stopping. Through the window, he could see the empty street, the dark sky, the storm that was getting worse by the minute. Rose was putting on her coat, a thin thing, not nearly warm enough for this weather. She pulled the collar up and grabbed her bag. Wait, Giwan said, standing up. How are you getting home? Bus, she said simply. The number 47 runs until midnight. But, he gestured outside. It's pouring, and the money. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Oh, right. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Well, it's only about 3 miles. I've walked farther. In this rain? Rose, no. It's fine, really. I've got an umbrella. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small folding umbrella, one of the cheap kind that would probably blow inside out the moment she stepped outside. See? I'm prepared. Giwan looked at her. This woman who had just spent her bus fare on him, who was about to walk 3 miles in a storm because she'd chosen kindness over convenience, who was still smiling at him like none of this was a problem. And something inside him cracked wide open. This wasn't just a test anymore. This wasn't about proving a theory or confirming his cynical beliefs about human nature. This was real. She was real. And he had just manipulated her into a situation that was going to leave her walking through dark streets in dangerous weather. "Let me walk with you," he said desperately. "Please, I can't let you." "Jihoon." She put her hand on his arm, and even through the flannel shirt, he could feel the warmth of her touch. "You have studying to do, and I'm not your responsibility. This was my choice, okay? I wanted to help you." Then she did something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. She took off her coat and held it out to him. "Here, it's going to get cold tonight. You don't have an umbrella, and this will keep you a little warmer on your way home." Giwan stared at the coat. At this woman who had nothing, who had just given him her last money, who was now trying to give him the coat off her back so he wouldn't be cold on his walk to an apartment that didn't exist. "I can't take your coat," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Sure you can." She pressed it into his hands. "I'll be fine. I run warm anyway." It was a lie. He could see her shivering slightly already, could see the goosebumps on her arms. But she was still smiling, still acting like this was perfectly normal, like sacrificing for a stranger was just what people did. Before he could protest further, she was heading for the door. "Text me when you get home safe, okay? And good luck with your accounting homework." Then she was gone, pushing through the door into the rain. Through the window, he watched her unfold that pathetic little umbrella and start walking down the street, her thin dress already darkening with rainwater. Giwan stood frozen, holding her coat in his hands, the weight of what he'd done crushing down on him. Behind him, Donna cleared her throat. "That's a good woman you've got there. Don't screw it up." "I already have," he whispered. He threw some bills on the table, more than enough to cover the meal and a generous tip, and rushed for the door. He had to stop her, had to tell her the truth, had to at least make sure she got home safely. But as he pushed through the door into the rain, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Down the street, about half a block from where Rose was walking, a silver Mercedes with tinted windows was idling at the curb. As he watched, it began to roll slowly forward, matching her pace. No, Giwan's training kicked in instantly. He scanned the street, noting the lack of other pedestrians, the broken streetlights, the service road that branched off to the left, perfect for an ambush. His hand went automatically to his waistband, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. The Mercedes accelerated slightly, pulling up alongside Rose. The passenger window rolled down. Giwan started running. He saw Rose stop, saw her lean down to speak to whoever was in the car, probably thinking they were asking for directions. Saw the back door start to open. He was still 20 feet away when the man emerged from the Mercedes, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black. Giwan recognized the way he moved, the economical precision of someone trained in combat. Recognition hit him like a fist to the gut. The man's face, briefly illuminated by a streetlight, was familiar. Jae-sung, one of his underboss's personal security team, which meant this wasn't random, which meant they knew where he was, which meant Rose was in danger because of him. "Rose," he shouted. "Run!" She turned at the sound of his voice, confusion on her face. That moment of distraction was all Jae-sung needed. He grabbed her arm and pulled, trying to force her toward the open car door. Rose screamed and drove her elbow back into Jae-sung's ribs, a good instinctive defense, but not enough against a trained operative. He barely grunted, maintaining his grip and reaching for something at his belt. Giwan closed the distance in seconds, but it felt like hours. He saw Jae-sung pull out a cloth, chloroform probably, saw him reaching for Rose's face with it. There was no time for subtlety, no time for pretense. The dragon of soul came roaring back. Giwan hit Jae-sung like a freight train, driving his shoulder into the man's kidney with enough force to send them both sprawling onto the wet pavement. Rose stumbled back, still clutching her textbook, eyes wide with terror. Get inside, Giwan shouted at her. Back to the diner, now! But even as he said it, he knew it was too late. Two more men were emerging from the Mercedes, and a black SUV was pulling up behind it. This wasn't just a grab team. This was a full tactical operation. Jae-sung recovered quickly, rolling to his feet with practiced ease. He looked at Giwan, and recognition flashed across his face, followed by confusion. Boss? What are you? Giwan didn't let him finish. He swept Jae-sung's legs out from under him and delivered a precise strike to his temple. The man dropped like a stone, but there were still four others advancing, fanning out to surround him. Professional, disciplined, and behind them, he could see a fifth figure stepping out of the SUV. Even in the rain and darkness, Giwan recognized that silhouette. Daejung, his underboss, his most trusted lieutenant for the past 5 years, his betrayer. Kim Giwan, Daejung called out, his voice carrying over the rain. The Dragon of Seoul, playing dress-up in a diner. Did you really think you could hide from us? Giwan positioned himself between the advancing men and Rose, who hadn't run. Of course she hadn't run, but was standing frozen in shock behind him. He could hear her breathing, fast and panicked. Let her go, Daejung, Giwan said coldly, all traces of the humble student gone from his voice. She has nothing to do with this. Daejung laughed. Oh, but she has everything to do with this. We've been watching you, boss. Watching you sneak away from your hotels. Watching you dress like a beggar. Watching you chase after this girl. Do you know how weak that makes you look? The Dragon of Seoul, brought to his knees by a woman? He gestured to his men. Take them both. The council wants him alive. I don't care about her. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what happens? The men moved in, and Giwan knew he had one chance to end this before Rose got caught in the crossfire. There were no weapons nearby, no useful cover. Just him, his training, and the element of surprise. Because these men still thought of him as their boss, not a threat. He thought of Rose's smile, her kindness, her coat still clutched in his hands. Then he moved. The first man went down before he realized he was under attack. Giwan drove the heel of his palm into the man's nose, feeling cartilage crunch, then used the man's falling body as a shield against the second attacker's punch. The second man adjusted quickly, coming in low for a takedown. Giwan sidestepped and brought his knee up into the man's face, then grabbed his collar and threw him into the third attacker. Behind him, Rose screamed. Giwan spun to see the fourth man, a younger operative he didn't recognize, reaching for her. Pure rage flooded through him. He covered the distance in 2 strides and caught the man's wrist just as his fingers brushed Rose's arm. Giwan twisted, feeling bones grind, and pulled the man into a brutal headbutt that left him unconscious before he hit the ground. Get behind me, Giwan ordered Rose, his voice hard and cold. This wasn't the gentle student anymore. This was the man who'd built an empire on violence and fear. Rose backed up, still clutching her textbook like a lifeline, her eyes huge and terrified. He could see the questions forming, the confusion and fear and dawning realization that the man she'd bought dinner for was someone else entirely. But there was no time for explanations. Daejung was still standing by the SUV, calm and composed, watching the fight with detached interest. You've gotten soft, Giwan, he called out, hesitating, worrying about collateral damage. The Dragon of Seoul, I knew would have burned this whole block to take out his enemies. The Dragon of Seoul you knew is dead, Giwan replied, keeping Rose behind him. I'm something different now. You're pathetic. Daejung pulled out a gun, a sleek black pistol that reflected the streetlights. The council will be disappointed, but they'll understand. You've become a liability. He raised the weapon, and Giwan knew he had perhaps 2 seconds before Daejung pulled the trigger. Not enough time to close the distance. Not enough time to find cover. Enough time to shield Rose. He shifted his weight, preparing to throw himself in front of her when a voice cut through the rain. Police! Drop your weapon! Sirens, flashing lights, squad cars appearing from both ends of the street. Donna, Giwan realized. The The waitress must have called them when she saw the confrontation starting. Dajeng hesitated, calculating odds, then lowered his gun and backed toward the SUV. This isn't over, Giwan. The council knows where you are now. They know about her. He looked past Giwan to Rose. Enjoy your last few days together. Then he was in the SUV, and they were peeling away, leaving the unconscious men sprawled on the wet pavement. Police officers were surrounding them now, shouting commands, weapons drawn. Giwan slowly raised his hands, hearing Rose do the same behind him. We're the victims, Giwan called out in English, his accent suddenly much thicker. They tried to kidnap her. We were defending ourselves. An officer approached cautiously, taking in the scene. The unconscious men, the frightened woman, the man in thrift store clothes who somehow knew how to fight like a special forces operative. Both of you, against the wall, the officer commanded. Hands where I can see them. Giwan complied, feeling Rose move beside him. They stood facing the wall of the diner as officers secured the scene, calling for ambulances, taking statements from Donna, who was watching from the doorway. And then, barely audible over the chaos, he heard Rose speak. Jihoon? Her voice was small, uncertain. Who are you really? He closed his eyes, feeling the rain run down his face, mingling with something that might have been tears. My name is Kim Gi-won, he said quietly, and I'm sorry. Before I go on with the rest of the story, take a quick second to drop a comment and let me know your location, like the video, and share. The police questioning took 40 minutes that felt like 40 years. Gi-won sat in the back of a squad car, his wrists still tingling from where the handcuffs had been before the officers removed them. Through the rain-streaked window, he could see Rose in another vehicle, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, talking to a female officer. Her hands were shaking as she gestured, trying to explain what had happened. He'd done this to her. His test. His paranoia. His need to find something pure in a corrupt world had put the one genuinely good person he'd met in years directly in the path of his enemies. The officer questioning him, a tired-looking detective named Morrison, flipped through his notepad. So let me get this straight. You're a graduate student from South Korea, studying business. You were on a date. These men tried to kidnap your date, and you... What? Took down 4 trained fighters with your bare hands? Adrenaline, Gi-won said, keeping his voice steady despite the lies. My father made me study Hapkido since I was a child. Muscle memory. Morrison didn't look convinced, but the evidence supported Gi-won's version. Rose was clearly the intended target. Gi-won had defended her. The attackers had fled. The unconscious men had already been taken away in ambulances, and preliminary searches showed they had no identification on them. Professionals, Morrison had muttered. The woman, Rose Okonkwo, she says you told her to run, that you knew these men were dangerous before they made their move. How did you know? Gi-won had prepared for this question. I saw them watching us in the diner. Through the window. They looked wrong, out of place. When we left and I saw the same car, I got worried. More lies, but necessary ones. Morrison sighed and closed his notepad. Look, son, I don't know what you're involved in, and frankly, I don't want to know. But those men are going to wake up eventually, and when they do, they're going to lawyer up and walk. Men like that always do. He leaned closer. Whatever trouble you're in, whatever this is really about, fix it before someone gets killed. Yes, sir. Morrison released him with a warning to stay available for follow-up questions. Gi-won stepped out of the squad car into the rain, which had finally started to lighten. The street was a chaos of flashing lights and yellow tape. Paramedics were packing up, officers were taking photographs of the scene, and Rose was standing beside the other police car, still wrapped in that blanket, staring at him with eyes that held too many questions. He walked toward her slowly, feeling like he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any moment. She didn't run, she just watched him come, her expression unreadable. Rose. Don't. Her voice was quiet but firm. Don't say you're sorry again. I need to understand what just happened. Those men, the way you fought, the things that man said to you. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. He called you boss, he called you the dragon of soul. Guan felt his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. He could lie again, deflect, make up some story about mistaken identity or corporate espionage or any of a dozen explanations that might preserve the illusion. But as he looked at her, this woman who had given him everything she had without hesitation, he couldn't bring himself to add another lie to the pile. "Can we walk?" he asked instead. "Please. I'll tell you everything, but not here. Not with all these people listening." Rose studied him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing the risk. He was a stranger who had lied to her, a man who had just taken down 4 attackers with terrifying efficiency, someone dangerous. But she was also tired and scared and probably in shock. And somewhere beneath all of that, he hoped, there was still a thread of the trust she'd shown him in the diner. "Okay," she said finally, "but somewhere public, somewhere with lights and people." "There's an all-night cafe 3 blocks from here," Giwan offered. "We can talk there." She nodded, and they started walking, maintaining a careful distance between them. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the streets were beginning to show signs of late-night life. A few cars passing, a couple of pedestrians hurrying home. Giwan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a message from Minjun. Status report. "Police scanner shows incident at your location." "Are you secure?" He typed back quickly. "Secure. Stand down. We'll contact soon." "Your people?" Rose asked, her voice tight. "My security team. They monitor police frequencies." He pocketed the phone. "They're not close enough to have helped tonight. That was deliberate on my part. I wanted privacy. For your test." There was an edge to her voice now, something sharp and hurt beneath the fear. "That's what this was, wasn't it? Some kind of test to see if I was a good person or just another gold digger?" He winced. "Yes, and the wallet, that was planned. Yes, and the cheap clothes, the whole struggling student act. Yes." She stopped walking and turned to face him, and the pain in her eyes was worse than any physical blow he'd ever taken. "I gave you my last $20. I was going to walk 3 miles in the rain. I gave you my coat." Her voice cracked. "And it was all just some sick game to you." "No," Giwan said desperately. "Rose, please. It started as a test, yes, but the moment you put that money on the table, the moment you smiled at me and said it was just $20, everything changed. I was going to tell you the truth. I was coming after you to confess everything when those men attacked." How convenient. She started walking again, faster now. How very convenient that the dramatic rescue happened right when you were about to come clean. "Rose, don't. Just don't." She wrapped her arms around herself, the blanket trailing behind her like a cape. "Tell me who you are. The truth this time. All of it." So as they walked through the rain-slick streets of Atlanta, Kim Gi-won told Rose Okonkwo the truth. He told her about Seoul, about his father, who had built a criminal empire from nothing and had raised his son to inherit it, about the territories and the rival gangs and the constant dance between legitimate business and illegal operations, about becoming the Dragon of Seoul at 23 when his father died and left him an organization of 200 men and interests spanning 3 countries. He told her about the violence, the decisions he'd made, the people he'd hurt. He didn't sugarcoat it or make excuses. He laid it out plainly, watching her face as each revelation landed like a blow. He told her about the women who had loved his money but not him, about the loneliness of being surrounded by people who wanted something from you, about the desperate, aching need to find someone who could see past the power and wealth to whatever remained of his humanity. And he told her about the test, about how he'd tracked her down after the charity gala, researched her background, planned the whole evening down to the smallest detail, about how he'd wanted to prove to himself that everyone was corrupt, that genuine kindness didn't exist, that his cynicism was justified. "But you proved me wrong," he finished quietly. "You were everything I'd stopped believing existed. And instead of being grateful, instead of being humbled by your kindness, I put you in danger. Those men tonight, they were from my organization. My underboss is staging a coup, and he tracked me through you. He knows about you now, which means you're in danger because of me." They had reached the cafe, a bright, warm space that was mostly empty at this late hour. Rose stood outside the door, still wrapped in that police blanket, rain dripping from her hair. So what now? She asked. You expect me to just, what, forgive you? Date a crime lord? Pretend this is all normal? No, Giwan said. I expect you to walk away. I expect you to go home, pack your things, and let me move you somewhere safe until I can deal with the threat. Then I expect you to forget you ever met me and live the life you deserve. Rose laughed, but it was a bitter sound. You expect me to just uproot my entire life? Leave school, leave my jobs, go into hiding because you decided to play games with me? I'll compensate you for everything. Tuition, living expenses, whatever you need. I don't want your money. The words came out sharp and angry, and several people inside the cafe looked up. Rose lowered her voice, but the fury remained. I don't want anything from you except the truth, and even that feels contaminated now. Do you have any idea what you've done? I trusted you. I gave you everything I had because I believed you were a good person who was struggling just like me. I saw something in you, something real and hurting and genuine. Was any of that even true? Yes, Giwan said, and his voice broke on the word. Yes, Rose. Everything I felt was real. The connection we had, the conversations, the way you made me feel like maybe I could be someone better. All of that was real. The only thing that was fake was my circumstances. Your circumstances? Rose shook her head incredulously. Your circumstances are that you're a criminal, that you hurt people for a living, that you run an organization built on violence and fear. Those aren't just circumstances, Giwan. That's who you are. I know. He wanted to reach for her, to touch her hand, to make her understand, but he kept his distance. I know what I am. I've known it for years. But when I'm with you, I can see who I could have been, who I might still become if I'm brave enough to try. Rose looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her working through it all. The lies and the truth, the danger and the connection, the anger and the hurt, and the tiny, fragile thread of possibility that still connected them. I need time, she said finally. I need to think about all of this without you standing there looking at me with those eyes. Take all the time you need. But please, Rose, please let me keep you safe while you think. Let me put security on you, just until the situation with my organization is resolved. I don't want your security. I don't want armed men following me around campus. Then discreet surveillance. You'll never see them, I promise. Just cameras and a few trained observers who will intervene only if there's a direct threat. He pulled out his phone. Please, if something happened to you because of me, I would never forgive myself. Rose studied him, then sighed. Fine, invisible security only. No one approaches me. No one talks to me. No one interferes with my life unless I'm in immediate danger. Agreed. And you stay away from me. No calls, no texts, no showing up at my apartment or my work. If I decide I want to talk to you again, I'll reach out. Otherwise, you leave me alone. Each word was a knife, but he nodded. Agreed. Good. She started to take off the blanket, then seemed to remember she was still wearing her thin dress underneath, soaked through from the rain. She kept it wrapped around herself. I'm going to go home now, alone. Don't follow me. Don't have your people escort me. Just let me go. Rose, please. She looked at him one last time, and the hurt in her eyes was unbearable. Please just let me go. So he did. He stood on that rain-slicked sidewalk and watched her walk away, still clutching that police blanket around her shoulders, getting smaller and smaller until she turned a corner and disappeared. Only then did he pull out his phone and call Minjun. I need a full security detail on Rose Okonkwo, he said without preamble. Discreet surveillance, 24/7. No contact unless there's an immediate threat. And I need you to pull together everything we have on Daejung's movements over the past month. He's been planning this coup for a while, which means there's a paper trail. Understood, boss. Are you? Minjun paused. Are you all right? Go-on looked down at his hands. They were shaking, not from adrenaline or fear, but from the sheer effort of letting her go. No, he said honestly. But that's not important right now. What's important is keeping her safe and ending this coup before anyone else gets hurt. We have the four men from tonight in custody. Well, hospital custody. They'll be interrogated as soon as they're conscious. No. Giwan's voice turned cold. Those men answer to Daejung, which means they'll die before they talk. Interrogating them is pointless. We need to go higher up the chain. Who's Daejung's primary contact in Seoul? Park Sang-woo. He sits on the Council of Elders. Then that's where we start. Get me everything on Park, his businesses, his family, his vulnerabilities, and send a message to the council. Tell them the Dragon of Seoul is coming home, and he's bringing fire. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and planning. Giwan barely slept. He coordinated with his people in Seoul, arranged transport, liquidated assets, and prepared for the kind of confrontation that would either cement his power or end his life. The coup had been brewing for months, he discovered. Daejung had been positioning pieces carefully, buying loyalty, making promises. Quick pause here. If you haven't subscribed yet, do that now, and also comment where you're watching from before I tell you what happens next. And through it all, his phone stayed silent. Rose didn't call, didn't text. The security reports showed her going about her normal routine: classes, library shift, clinical observation, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't learned that the man she'd shown kindness to was a monster in disguise. On the third night, Minjin found him in the hotel suite, surrounded by documents and half-empty coffee cups. Boss, you need to rest. The flight to Seoul leaves in 6 hours. I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't slept properly since the incident. You're running on caffeine and fury, and that's not sustainable. Giwan looked up from the tactical map he'd been studying. Is she safe? Rose? Yes, no unusual activity around her. She seems to be handling everything remarkably well, all things considered. She's strong. Giwan felt something twist in his chest. Stronger than I ever gave her credit for. She survived poverty, loss, discrimination, and kept her faith in people. Then I came along and proved her faith was misplaced. Minjin sat down across from him. Permission to speak freely, boss. Always. You're punishing yourself. I've watched you do it for 3 days straight, but self-flagellation isn't going to fix this. You made a mistake. A big one, yes, but a mistake nonetheless. The question now is what you do with it. What I do with it is end the coup, secure the organization, and make sure Rose is never in danger again because of my world. And then what? You just walk away from her? Spend the rest of your life alone because you tested her loyalty in a supremely idiotic way? Giwan almost smiled. You're calling your boss idiotic? I'm calling my boss's methods idiotic. There's a difference. Minjin leaned forward. Look, I don't pretend to understand love or relationships or any of that, but I do understand regret. And I've seen what happens to men who let the best thing in their lives slip away because they think they don't deserve it. I don't deserve her. Probably not. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is whether you're willing to become someone who does deserve her. To actually change, not just fantasize about change. Before Giwan could respond, his phone buzzed. An alert from the security team. Subject Rose Okonkwo has deviated from normal pattern. Currently walking toward warehouse district. Advise. Giwan was on his feet instantly. The warehouse district? At 11 at night? Why? Minjin was already pulling up the surveillance feeds on his tablet. I'm seeing her now. She's alone, walking with purpose, like she knows where she's going. A cold knot formed in Giwan's stomach. Pull up the route. Show me exactly where she's headed. The map appeared on the screen, showing Rose's location as a blinking blue dot moving steadily toward an area of abandoned industrial buildings. And just ahead of her position, barely visible on the satellite imagery, was a cluster of vehicles. Giwan zoomed in on the vehicles and felt his blood turn to ice. Silver Mercedes, black SUVs, the same configuration from the diner attack. It's a trap, he breathed. Daejung is using her as bait. How would he even? Minjin stopped. The phone number on the $20 bill. That was in the police report, wasn't it? Of course. The $20 Rose had given him, one of the plot twists he'd discovered later, had a phone number scribbled on it. a number that connected to the coup. Daejung must have realized Rose was the one who had that bill, which meant she might have information, might have seen something. Or, more likely, Daejung was using her to draw Giwon out. Get the team mobilized, Giwon ordered, already moving toward the door. Full tactical gear. I want everyone at these coordinates in 10 minutes. Boss, this is clearly a trap. I don't care. I'm not leaving her to face those monsters alone. He was in the car and racing through Atlanta's streets before Minjun could protest further. The security team's updates came through his earpiece in clipped, professional tones. Subject still proceeding toward warehouse complex. Multiple heat signatures detected in target building. Recommend abort. This is a kill box. Giwon ignored them all. He pushed the BMW to its limits. Running red lights, weaving through sparse traffic. The warehouse district loomed ahead. Dark shapes against the night sky. Gutted buildings that had once housed thriving businesses. He ditched the car 3 blocks away and proceeded on foot, moving through shadows with the practiced silence of someone who'd spent half his life hunting and being hunted. He could see Rose now, a small figure in the distance, still walking toward the central warehouse. She wasn't running, wasn't looking around nervously. She walked like someone who had made a decision and was following through. Consequences be damned. Giwon's earpiece crackled. Boss, we're 2 minutes out. Hold position. But he couldn't hold position, because Rose had just reached the warehouse entrance, and the door was opening, and he could see figures moving inside. She stepped through the doorway and disappeared. Giwon abandoned caution and ran. He hit the warehouse entrance at full speed, his mind cataloging threats automatically. 6 men visible on the ground floor, more in the catwalks above. Daejung standing in the center, lit by a single overhead lamp, with Rose standing 10 feet away from him. She wasn't bound, wasn't being held at gunpoint. She was just standing there, chin up, looking at Daejung with an expression of calm defiance. Rose! Giwon's voice echoed through the empty space. Everyone turned to look at him. Daejung smiled. Rose's eyes went wide. Giwon? She looked genuinely shocked to see him. What are you doing here? What am I? He stared at her in disbelief. What are you doing here? This is a trap. I know it's a trap, Rose said, as if this was obvious. That's why I came. Daejung laughed. Oh, this is delicious. The dragon of soul, confused by a woman. How the mighty have fallen. Giwon moved carefully into the warehouse, positioning himself between Rose and the nearest threats. His team would be here soon, but soon might not be fast enough. Rose, please. Get behind me. Let me handle this. Handle what, exactly? Rose didn't move. Handle the mess you created? Handle the criminal organization that's trying to kill you? Handle the fact that you lied to me and tested me like I was some kind of experiment? I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. The words came out sharp and angry. I needed your honesty, Giwon. I needed you to trust me the way I trusted you. But you couldn't do that, could you? You had to play your games and run your tests. Daejung was watching this exchange with obvious amusement. This is better than I'd hoped. Please continue. I'm fascinated by this lover's quarrel. Shut up, Giwon and Rose said in unison. Then Rose turned to Daejung, and her voice became cold and professional. I came here because you sent me a message saying you had information about the attacks, about why I was targeted. I want answers. And I want leverage, Daejung replied. Leverage over a man who's become dangerously unstable. You see, Miss Okonkwo, the dragon of soul used to be predictable. Ruthless, yes. Violent, certainly. But predictable. Then he met you, and suddenly he's playing dress-up, pretending to be poor, making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. He began to circle slowly, his men adjusting positions to maintain their perimeter. The Council in Seoul doesn't appreciate unpredictability. They sent me to assess the situation. And what I've found is that the great Kim Giwon has a weakness, a fatal one. She's not a weakness, Giwon said quietly. She's the only real thing in my life. Exactly, Daejung smiled. Which makes her perfect leverage. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to return to Seoul, abdicate your position to the Council, and transfer all your assets to a trust they control. In exchange, Miss Okonkwo gets to live her normal life, unharmed and unbothered. And if I refuse? Daejung's smile widened. Then we start by breaking her fingers, one by one, and we make you watch. Rage flooded through Giwon, hot and primal. He felt his control slipping, felt the dragon of soul rising up from wherever he'd tried to bury it. His hands clenched into fists, and he took a step toward Daejung. Boss, don't. Minjun's voice came through his earpiece. We're in position. 30 seconds. 30 seconds. He just needed to keep everyone talking for 30 seconds. But Rose apparently had other plans. You're assuming a lot, she said to Daejung, her voice cutting through the tension. You're assuming I care what happens to Giwon. You're assuming I'm some kind of leverage. But you've made a critical error in your calculations. Daejung raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what's that? Rose reached into her jacket pocket, moving slowly, deliberately, and pulled out her phone. You assumed I came here alone. She tapped the screen, and suddenly the warehouse was flooded with light. Floodlights from outside, police sirens, bullhorns calling for everyone to stand down. I called the police before I came, Rose said calmly. Told them I had information about the men who attacked me 3 nights ago. Told them those men would be here tonight. Gave them this address. Giwon stared at her in amazement. She'd set up her own trap, used herself as bait to draw out Daejung, then called in law enforcement to handle it. Daejung's face twisted with fury. You stupid girl. Do you have any idea what you've done? Probably saved both our lives, Rose replied, though I'm still deciding if his is worth saving. Then everything happened at once. Daejung lunged for Rose, pulling a knife from his belt. His men raised their weapons, some aiming at the doors where police were breaching, others aiming at Giwon. And Minjun's team came crashing through the skylights above, rappelling down on tactical lines. Giwon moved on pure instinct. He crossed the distance to Rose in 3 strides, caught Daejung's knife hand, and twisted until he heard bones crack. The knife clattered to the floor, and Giwon swept Daejung's legs out from under him, driving him face first into the concrete. Around them, chaos erupted. Police were flooding in from multiple entrances. Minjun's team was taking down Daejung's men with efficient, non-lethal precision. Gunfire echoed, warning shots mostly, designed to intimidate rather than kill. Giwon kept Daejung pinned to the ground, one knee on his spine, until police officers swarmed them and pulled Giwon away. He felt handcuffs click around his wrists again and didn't resist. But his eyes were on Rose, who was standing calmly in the middle of the chaos, talking to a police officer as if she orchestrated tactical operations every day. She glanced at him once, and for just a moment, their eyes met across the warehouse. He tried to convey everything he felt, the admiration, the terror, the overwhelming relief that she was safe, the love he didn't have the right to feel but felt anyway. Then she looked away, and he was being escorted out of the warehouse into the blinding lights of police vehicles and news cameras. The next several hours were a blur of interrogation rooms and legal maneuvering. Giwon's lawyers descended like a flock of very expensive vultures, negotiating his release while carefully dancing around the question of his actual business activities. Daejung and his men were charged with attempted kidnapping, assault, and a host of other crimes. And through it all, Giwon kept thinking about Rose, about the way she'd walked into that warehouse knowing it was a trap, about how she'd outsmarted everyone, Daejung, Giwon, even the police, with nothing but her phone and her courage. Dawn was breaking when they finally released him. He stepped out of the police station to find Minjun waiting with the car. The team cleaned up the warehouse before the police finished processing the scene, Minjun reported. No evidence linking you to anything beyond self-defense. Daejung is going away for a long time, and the council in Seoul is reconsidering their position. And Rose? She gave her statement and went home 3 hours ago. The police have her listed as a cooperating witness who bravely helped them catch dangerous criminals. Minjun paused. She's remarkable, boss. Truly remarkable. I know. Giwon got into the car, feeling the exhaustion of the past 3 days finally catching up with him. take me to her apartment. Boss, I know she said to stay away. I know she doesn't want to see me, but she walked into a warehouse full of armed men tonight because of me. The least I can do is make sure she's actually okay. Minjin sighed, but didn't argue. They drove through the quiet morning streets to the small apartment building where Rose lived. Giwan knew the address from the security reports. A modest building in a safe enough neighborhood, nothing fancy but clean and well maintained. He stood outside for a long moment, looking up at what he knew was her window on the third floor. The lights were on. She was awake. Before he could talk himself out of it, he pressed the buzzer. Static. Then her voice, tinged with exhaustion. Yes, it's me, he said simply. I know you said to stay away, but I needed to make sure you were all right. After tonight, after what you did. Silence. For a moment, he thought she'd just hang up. Then the door buzzed open. He climbed the stairs to her floor, each step feeling heavier than the last. What was he even going to say? Thank you for saving my life? I'm sorry for everything? Please give me another chance, even though I've proven I don't deserve one? Her door was already open when he reached it. Rose stood in the doorway, wearing sweatpants and an old university t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked exhausted, beautiful, and absolutely furious. You have 5 minutes, she said. Then I never want to see you again. Giwan nodded and stepped inside. The apartment was tiny, a studio really, with a kitchenette in one corner and a bed that folded into the wall. Medical textbooks were stacked everywhere. A single photograph sat on the desk, Rose with an older man who must have been her father, both of them smiling. Say what you came to say, Rose prompted, crossing her arms. He turned to face her, and all the speeches he'd prepared evaporated. There was only truth left. You terrified me tonight, he said. When I realized you'd walked into that warehouse, when I thought Daijung might hurt you to get to me, Rose, I've faced death 100 times and never flinched, but the thought of something happening to you made me understand what fear really means. Good, she said coldly. Maybe now you understand how I felt when those men attacked me, when I realized the person I trusted had lied to me about everything. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He took a breath. But I also need to tell you that what you did tonight was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. You could have been killed. So could you. That was kind of the point. He blinked. You set that up to save me? I set it up to end the threat, Rose corrected. To make sure neither of us had to keep looking over our shoulders. When Daijung reached out to me offering information, I knew it was a trap. But I also knew it was an opportunity. So I did what you apparently do all the time. I took a calculated risk. By making yourself bait. By trusting that you'd come for me. That your security team would track me. That you'd bring back up. And that I could time everything perfectly so the police would arrive when they do the most good. She shook her head. I may not be a criminal mastermind, Giwan, but I'm not stupid. I understand strategy. He stared at her, understanding dawning. You manipulated me, the same way I manipulated you in the diner. Yes, how does it feel? Terrible, he admitted, absolutely terrible. Good. Now you know how I felt. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened settling between them. Finally, Giwan spoke again. Your 5 minutes are almost up, so I'll say this quickly. I'm leaving Atlanta, going back to Seoul to deal with the council, to restructure my organization, to figure out who I want to be going forward. I don't know how long it will take. Months, probably. Maybe longer. Rose nodded, her expression unreadable. But I want you to know that meeting you changed me. Not because you passed some test or proved some theory, but because you showed me what goodness looks like, what genuine kindness looks like. And I want to be worthy of that kindness, even if I never get the chance to be with you again. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and set it on the small table by the door. This is information for a trust fund, enough to cover your medical school tuition, living expenses, and then some. It's not a payment. It's not hush money. It's just me trying to make sure the damage I caused doesn't derail your dreams. I told you I don't want your money. I know. And if you don't want it, Tear up the papers and throw them away. But please, Rose, please don't let your pride cost you your future. You deserve to become a doctor. You deserve to help people. Don't let what I did stop you from achieving that. He moved toward the door, feeling like every step was tearing something vital out of his chest. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. For what it's worth, that night in the diner when you gave me your last $20, that was the most real moment of my entire life. Everything I felt was true. Everything I wanted was true. I just had to lie about everything else to get there. Rose didn't respond. She just looked at him with those warm, expressive eyes that had first captured his attention at the charity gala. Giwan left, pulling the door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. He was halfway down the stairs when he heard her door open again. Giwan? He turned. She was standing in the hallway, backlit by the light from her apartment. Come back when you figured out who you really are, she said quietly. Not the dragon of soul, not the struggling student, just you, whoever that is. If you can find him, come back and introduce us properly. Then she went inside and closed the door, leaving him standing on the stairs with something that felt dangerously like hope blooming in his chest. He pulled out his phone and called Minjun. Change of plans. I need you to set up something before we leave for Seoul. What kind of something? An anonymous scholarship fund for medical students from underrepresented communities. I want it established through a foundation that can't be traced back to me, and I want Rose Okonkwo to be one of the first recipients, but she can never know it came from me. Consider it done, boss. Giwan got into the car and looked back up at Rose's window one last time. The light was still on. He imagined her inside, probably already back to studying, determined to build her future, no matter what obstacles life threw at her. And as they drove away from the apartment, from Atlanta, from the woman who had changed everything, Kim Giwan made himself a promise. He would dismantle the parts of his empire built on cruelty. He would find ways to build something better, something that helped instead of hurt. He would become someone worthy of Rose's kindness, even if she never forgave him. Even if he never got the chance to be with her again, because she'd given him something more valuable than her last $20. She'd given him a reason to become a better man, and he wasn't going to waste it. Take a second to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, then stay with me, because the next part changes everything. The penthouse suite occupied the entire top floor of Atlanta's most exclusive residential tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a glittering sprawl of lights that seemed to go on forever. The furniture was minimalist and expensive. Italian leather, Japanese wood, art pieces that probably cost more than most people's houses. Rose stood in the center of the living room, still wearing her police blanket over her university t-shirt and sweatpants, looking utterly out of place. "This is where you've been staying?" Her voice was quiet, but Giwan could hear the anger underneath. "While you were pretending to be broke, you were living here?" Yes. There was no point in lying anymore. Giwan moved to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water, bringing one to her. "Please, sit. You must be exhausted." "I'm fine standing." She didn't take the water. Instead, she walked slowly around the space, taking in the details. Her fingers trailed across a side table that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She stopped in front of a painting, abstract, violent slashes of red and black. "How much is this worth?" "I don't know. A few $100,000, maybe." Rose laughed, but there was no humor in it. A few $100,000 for a painting. Meanwhile, I'm rationing instant noodles to make sure I can afford my textbooks. She turned to face him. "Do you have any idea how obscene this is? You have all of this, and you dressed up like a poor person to test whether I was worthy of your trust?" "I know how it looks." "Do you? Do you really?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a rich man playing games with someone's life. It looks like you treated my poverty as a costume you could put on and take off whenever you wanted, while for me it's just reality." Giwan set both water glasses down on the counter, his hands shaking slightly. You're right. Everything you're saying is right. I was cruel and thoughtless and. Stop. Rose held up a hand. Stop apologizing. I don't want your apologies right now. I want to understand. Help me understand why you thought this was acceptable. He sank into one of the leather chairs, suddenly feeling the weight of the past 72 hours. Because everyone in my life has wanted something from me. Since I was 17 years old, since I took over my father's organization, I've been surrounded by people who see me as a resource to exploit. Women who wanted my money, men who wanted my power, business partners who wanted my connections. So you decided to lie to someone who had nothing? I decided to find someone who didn't know who I was, someone who might see me as just a person. He looked up at her. That night at the charity gala, when we first met, you asked me what I was running from. No one had ever asked me that before. Everyone else was too busy trying to impress me or use me or manipulate me. But you just saw me. Rose moved to the window, staring out at the city lights. And when we met again at the diner, you saw an opportunity. A way to prove that even someone like me, someone genuinely struggling, could be bought or would abandon you when things got hard. Yes and no. Guan stood and moved closer, though he maintained a respectful distance. I wanted to prove my cynicism was justified, but the moment you put that $20 on the table, the moment you offered me your coat, Rose, my entire worldview shattered. I realized I wasn't testing you. I was testing myself, testing whether I could still recognize goodness when I saw it. And did you? She turned to face him. Recognize it? Yes, which is why I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you safe, and then I'm going to let you go. You deserve someone honest, someone good, someone who doesn't come with a criminal empire and enemies who will use you as leverage. Rose studied him for a long moment. What happened to Daejung and his men? They're in custody. The charges will stick. Attempted kidnapping, assault. My lawyers made sure of it. But that doesn't end the threat. Daejung was working for the council in Seoul, the elders who think I've become unstable. As long as they see you as my weakness, you're in danger. So what's your plan? Keep me locked in this golden cage while you go fight your war? No. My plan is to end this quickly and permanently, then make sure you can go back to your normal life. School, work, your dreams of becoming a doctor, all of it, without my shadow hanging over you. Rose walked over to the dining table and pulled out a chair, finally sitting down. She looked small in the massive space, dwarfed by the luxury surrounding her. Show me. Show you what? Everything. If I'm in danger because of your world, I want to understand it. Show me who you really are, Giwan. Not the student, not the apologetic crime lord, the real you. So he did. Over the next hour, Giwan laid out the structure of his organization. He showed her maps of territories, explained the various business fronts, some legitimate, some less so. He told her about the Council of Elders in Seoul who thought they controlled him, about the lieutenants who ran operations in different cities, about the delicate balance between making money and maintaining power. Rose listened without interrupting, her medical student's mind absorbing information and making connections. Finally, she spoke. Your underboss, Daejung. How did he know where to find us that night? I've been trying to figure that out. My security team swept for tracking devices. My phone is encrypted. The only people who knew about my plan were Min-jun and two others, all of whom I trust completely. What about me? Rose asked quietly. Did you investigate me before our date? Giwan felt ice settle in his stomach. Yes. Background check, financial records, class schedule, student records. Rose's eyes widened. If you could access my student records, so could someone else. Someone in your organization who knew you were interested in me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The charity gala. I wasn't as discreet as I thought. Someone saw us talking, saw me looking at you. And when I requested information about you, you left a trail. Rose stood and began pacing. Someone in your organization tracked the information request, accessed the same records, and used them to find me, which means this was never just about testing me. You accidentally painted a target on my back the moment you showed interest. Giwan was already pulling out his phone, dialing Minjun. I need you to pull the logs for any information requests made through our systems in the past month. Focus on anything related to Rose Okonkwo or the university. Minjun's voice came through, alert despite the late hour. On it. What am I looking for? A leak. Someone who accessed the same information I did. Someone who knew I was interested in her and used that knowledge to track us. Boss, if there's a mole in our security infrastructure, then we find them. Now. He hung up and turned to Rose. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I should have been more careful. Yes, you should have. But her voice had lost some of its edge. But what's done is done. The question now is how we fix it. We don't do anything. You stay here, where you're safe, while I handle this. Rose fixed him with a look that reminded him of the professors he'd had in his brief, legitimate university experience. The ones who didn't tolerate nonsense. I don't think so. If someone in your organization is targeting me, I want to know who and why, and I want to help stop them. Rose, these people are dangerous. They attacked me in the street. They tried to kidnap me. I'm already involved, whether you like it or not. She crossed her arms. So either you let me help, or I'll find my own way to investigate. Your choice. Giwan recognized the stubborn set of her jaw. She meant it. And honestly, after watching her orchestrate the warehouse operation, he was beginning to understand that Rose Okonkwo was far more than a kind-hearted medical student. She had steel in her spine. Fine, he said, but you follow my lead, and if things get dangerous, you get to safety. Agreed? Agreed. His phone rang. Minjun calling back already. Boss, you need to see this. Send it to the secure tablet. Giwan pulled up his encrypted tablet and opened the file Minjun had sent. It was a log of information requests, timestamped and user identified. He scrolled through the entries, looking for, there, 3 weeks ago, the day after the charity gala, someone had requested a full background check on Rose Okonkwo. The user ID was RM47. RM47, Jiwan muttered. Who is that? More files appeared on the screen as Minjun sent additional information. Ryu Min-seo. She's one of the junior analysts in our intelligence division. Been with the organization for 2 years. Excellent record. No flags. Pull up everything we have on her. Family, associates, financial transactions, everything. Rose had moved to stand beside him, looking at the tablet screen. A woman. You didn't expect that. I didn't expect anyone to betray me, Giwan admitted. But you're right. I assumed it would be one of the men. Stupid. Not stupid. Just human. Rose pointed at the screen. Look at the timestamps. She accessed my records 3 times. Once right after your initial request, then twice more in the following week. She was building a complete profile. Minjun's voice came through the phone speaker. Boss, I'm seeing some interesting financial activity on Ryu Min-seo's accounts. Large deposits, regularly spaced, going back 6 months. Always from different sources, always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic review. She's been bought, Giwan said. The question is by whom? By the council, Rose said suddenly. Both men turned to look at her. Think about it. Your underboss was working for the council, right? They wanted to remove you because you're unstable. So they plant someone in your intelligence division months ago. Have her watch for vulnerabilities, for anything they can exploit. When you suddenly take an interest in a woman, a poor student with no connections, no protection, she reports it. And they decide to use me as leverage. Giwan stared at her. You figured that out in 30 seconds. I'm good at pattern recognition. It's what makes me good at diagnostics. Rose studied the tablet screen. So what do we do about it? We use her, Minjun said over the phone. If she's reporting to the council, we can feed her false information. Make them think they're still in control while we prepare our actual response. No, Giwan shook his head. Too risky. If they suspect we're onto them, they'll accelerate their timeline. We need to remove her from the equation entirely. You mean kill her? Rose's voice was flat. No. Giwan met her eyes. I mean remove her access, isolate her, and extract information. I'm not a monster, Rose. I don't kill people for doing their jobs, even if that job is betraying me. He saw something shift in her expression. Not quite forgiveness, but maybe understanding. Maybe the beginning of belief that he could be something other than what he'd been. Minjun, bring Ryu Minseo in for questioning. Quiet, no violence. I want to know everything she knows about the council's plans. He paused. And I want you to set up a meeting. With who, boss? With the council. In Seoul. 3 days from now. Giwon's voice turned cold and hard. Tell them the Dragon of Seoul is coming home to address their concerns. Tell them I'll come alone, unarmed, to demonstrate my good faith. Rose grabbed his arm. That's insane. They'll kill you. They'll try. He covered her hand with his. But I won't actually be alone, and I won't actually be unarmed. I'll have something much more dangerous than weapons. What's that? Information, leverage, and a very carefully constructed plan. He looked at Minjun's contact on the screen. Set it up and prepare the contingencies we discussed last month. The scorched earth protocols? Minjun sounded shocked. Boss, those are extreme. Yes, but necessary. If the council wants to play games with innocent people's lives, they need to understand what that will cost them. After Giwon hung up, Rose sank back into her chair. You're going to war with your own organization. I'm going to end a war that's been brewing for months. The council thought I was weak because I started questioning our methods, looking for ways to transition more of our operations toward legitimate business. They saw that as betrayal of my father's legacy. Was it? Yes, Jiwon said simply. My father built an empire on violence and fear. It made him powerful, but it also made him paranoid and alone. He died surrounded by guards, with no one who actually cared about him, only people who feared him or wanted to replace him. I don't want that life. Rose was quiet for a moment. What do you want? I want to be someone worthy of the kindness you showed me. Someone who builds things instead of destroying them. Someone who... He trailed off, unable to finish. Someone who could deserve a second chance, Rose completed softly. Their eyes met, and Giwon felt that same electric connection from the diner, from the charity gala, from every moment they'd spent together. But now it was complicated by everything that had happened, by the lies and the danger and the vast gulf between their worlds. Stay here tonight, he said. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll work on the plan together if you're still willing to help. But right now you need sleep. Rose nodded. Where will you sleep? I won't. I have 3 days to prepare for the most important meeting of my life. Sleep is a luxury I can't afford. Guan. Please, Rose, let me do this one thing right. Let me keep you safe while I fix the mess I created. She studied him for a long moment, then stood. Fine, but I'm helping with the planning tomorrow. No arguments. No arguments, he agreed. I'll pause here briefly. Subscribe to the channel and drop a comment with your location because what happens next will make everything clearer. Next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Ryu Minseo, when questioned, broke quickly and confirmed everything they'd suspected. The council had planted her 6 months ago, specifically to watch for vulnerabilities in Giwon's life. When she reported his interest in Rose, they'd seen an opportunity. But she'd also provided information Giwon hadn't expected. The council wasn't unified. 3 of the 7 elders supported Daejung's coup. 2 were neutral. And 2, including Park Sang-woo, the elder Daejung supposedly reported to, were actually loyal to Giwon and had been quietly building opposition to the coup from within. It's a civil war waiting to happen, Rose said, studying the organizational charts Giwon had spread across the dining table. The council is fracturing along generational and ideological lines. Exactly. Giwon traced his finger along the connection lines. The older elders, the ones who knew my father, they're traditional. They believe in the old ways, in violence and territory and fear. But the younger ones, the ones who built legitimate businesses as fronts and discovered they liked legitimate money, they're ready for change. And you're caught in the middle. I'm the symbol both sides are fighting over. If the traditionalists can remove me, they can install someone more brutal, more old school. If the reformers can keep me in power, I can push the organization toward legitimacy. Rose leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. They'd been working for 12 hours straight, And despite her insistence on helping, Giwan could see the exhaustion wearing on her. So what's your play? I give them both what they want. That's impossible. Not if I change the game entirely. Giwan pulled up a different set of documents on his tablet. What if the Dragon of Soul died? Rose's eyes widened. You want to fake your death? I want to actually end that identity. Officially resign, transfer leadership to the council, and walk away. Let them fight over an empty throne while I rebuild my life as someone else. They won't let you just walk away. You know too much. They will if walking away means they get everything else. My territories, my assets, my connections, all of it, transferred to the organization with the stipulation that it's used to transition toward legitimate operations. I'll keep enough to live comfortably but quietly, and I'll have insurance, information that gets released if anything happens to me or anyone I care about. Rose processed this. It's not a bad plan, but it requires the council to trust that you'll actually stay gone. Which is where you come in. She looked at him sharply. Excuse me? Not you personally, Giwan clarified quickly. But the idea of you. The council saw my interest in you as weakness. So I'll prove them right. I'll tell them I'm leaving the organization to be with you to try to build a normal life. They'll believe that because it confirms what they already think, that I've been compromised by emotion. And have you? Rose's voice was quiet. Been compromised by emotion? Giwan met her gaze steadily. Yes, completely, but not in the way they think. You didn't make me weak, Rose. You made me realize I'd been strong in all the wrong ways. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the confession hanging between them. Finally, Rose spoke. If you're going to do this, fake your death, walk away from everything, you need to do it perfectly. No loose ends, no questions. The Dragon of Soul needs to die so completely that Kim Giwan can actually live. I know. So let's make sure we do this right. The docks of Seoul Harbor stretched out into the darkness, a maze of shipping containers and cranes silhouetted against the night sky. Giwan stood alone on Pier 17, as he'd promised, wearing a simple black suit and no visible weapons. But he wasn't actually alone. Min-jun and his team were positioned in the surrounding containers, invisible but ready. And half a world away, Rose was monitoring everything through the encrypted feed from Giwan's hidden camera. The council arrived in a convoy of black vehicles. 7 elderly men emerged, flanked by their personal security. Park Sang-woo led the group, his weathered face carefully neutral. Beside him walked Ko Jae-in, one of the traditionalists, and the one Giwan suspected of masterminding the coup. Kim Giwan, Park said formally, you called this meeting. We are here to listen. Thank you for coming, honored elders. Giwan bowed respectfully, noting the subtle positioning of the security forces. I've called you here to end the conflict that has been tearing our organization apart. There would be no conflict if you hadn't abandoned your father's principles, Ko Jae-in said sharply. Your weakness has invited challengers. Your sentiment has made us vulnerable. My father's principles built an empire of fear, Giwan replied. But fear is unstable. Fear turns allies into enemies. Fear breeds the kind of betrayal that led Daejung to work against us. Daejung acted because you gave him reason to, another elder said. Because you pursued a woman like a lovesick fool instead of focusing on business. That woman saved my life, Giwan said quietly. She showed me something I'd forgotten, that there are still good people in this world, people worth protecting instead of exploiting. Ko Jae-in laughed. And now what? You lecture us about morality? You, who have ordered more deaths than some of us combined? No, now I offer you a choice. Giwan pulled out a tablet and pulled up a document. I'm resigning. Effective immediately, I'm transferring all my territories, assets, and operations to the Council for Redistribution. The Dragon of Soul dies tonight. Shocked silence. Then Ko Jae-in spoke. This is a trick. No trick. It's a trade. I give you everything you wanted, control of the organization, freedom to run it however you choose. In exchange, I walk away. Clean break, no retaliation, no interference. And if we refuse? Park Sang-woo asked carefully. If we believe you'll become a threat in the future, then you should know that I've compiled comprehensive documentation of every illegal operation this organization has run for the past 10 years. Financial records, witness statements, video evidence, everything. It's currently held by 3 different law firms in 3 different countries, with instructions to release it to international authorities if I don't check in regularly. Kojain's face turned red with fury. You dare threaten the council? I dare to ensure my survival and the survival of people I care about. This isn't a threat, honored elder. It's insurance. As long as I'm left alone, as long as Rose Okonkwo is left alone, that information stays locked away. But if anything happens to either of us, the entire organization falls. One of the neutral elders stepped forward. You're asking us to let you go free with leverage over us and trust that you won't use it? I'm asking you to make a rational business decision. You get immediate control of a profitable enterprise. I get to disappear and live quietly. Everyone wins. Park Sang-woo studied him carefully. And the woman, this Rose Okonkwo, is not part of this world and never will be. She wants nothing from this organization. All she wants is to finish her education and become a doctor. Surely the council can allow one innocent person to live her life in peace? The elders conferred in low voices. Giwan waited, keeping his face calm while his heart hammered against his ribs. Everything depended on this moment, whether they would accept his offer or call his bluff. Finally, Park Sang-woo spoke. The council accepts your resignation with conditions. You will sign over all assets and territories tonight. You will provide a list of all current operations and their managers, and you will submit to one final request. What request? You will leave Korea and not return for 5 years. If you must conduct business in the country, it will be under our supervision. You become a ghost, Kim Gi-won, a memory, nothing more. It was harsh but fair, and exactly what Gi-won had been hoping for. Agreed, he said. The transfer took 3 hours. Documents were signed, accounts were verified, territories were officially reassigned. By the time the sun began to rise over Seoul Harbor, Kim Gi-won had officially ceased to exist as the head of South Korea's most powerful criminal organization. As the council's convoy drove away, Min-jun emerged from hiding and stood beside Gi-won. It's done then, Min-jun said quietly. The dragon is dead. The dragon is dead, Gi-won confirmed. Long live whoever I'm going to be next. Any ideas? A few. Gi-won smiled for the first time in days. But first, I have a promise to keep. 18 months later, Rose stood in her cap and gown, waiting with the other graduates for the ceremony to begin. It had been the hardest year and a half of her life, balancing medical school with the trauma of everything that had happened, working through her feelings about Gi-won, building a future despite the chaos of her past. The anonymous scholarship that had appeared 6 months ago had helped enormously. Enough to quit one of her jobs, to afford better housing, to focus more fully on her studies. She'd investigated its source, of course, but every trail led nowhere. She suspected she knew where it came from, but she had no proof. She hadn't heard from Gi-won since he'd left Atlanta. True to his word, he'd stayed away, leaving her to process everything on her own terms. Sometimes she missed him. Sometimes she was angry at him. And sometimes, more often than she wanted to admit, she wondered if he'd actually managed to change, or if it had all been words. The graduation ceremony began. Names were called. Students crossed the stage, received their diplomas, moved their tassels from right to left. Rose waited her turn, thinking about her father, about her grandmother, about all the people who'd sacrificed so she could be here. Rose Okonkwo. She walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, accepted her diploma. As she turned to exit, she caught a glimpse of someone in the audience that made her heart stop. He was sitting in the back row, partially hidden by a pillar. Clean-shaven, hair shorter and darker than she remembered, wearing an ordinary suit that could have come from any department store. He looked normal, unremarkable. Nothing like the dragon of Seoul or even the confident man she'd met at the charity gala. But his eyes, those eyes were the same. And when they met hers, they held everything he couldn't say in this moment. Pride, regret, hope, love. Then he smiled, a small, genuine smile, and stood to leave. Rose made it through the rest of the ceremony on autopilot. When it finally ended, she pushed through the crowd of celebrating graduates and their families, looking for him. But he was gone, vanished into the crowd as if he'd never been there at all. Except there was something on her seat. A small envelope, cream-colored and expensive-looking. Rose opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single card with a phone number written in elegant handwriting, and beneath it, a short message. I've spent the last year and a half becoming someone new. Someone better, I hope. Someone who doesn't test people or lie about who he is. Someone who builds clinics instead of criminal empires. I don't know if I succeeded, but if you're willing to find out, call me. We can start over, properly this time. No tests, no lies, just two people getting to know each other. But only if you want to. Only if you think I've earned a second chance. Congratulations on your graduation, Dr. Okonkwo. Your grandmother would be so proud. Jihoon Rose read the note 3 times, her heart pounding. She thought about everything that had happened. The diner, the warehouse, the terror and the lies and the impossible situation he'd put her in. She thought about the man who'd taken down armed attackers to protect her, who'd given up his empire rather than put her in danger, who'd stayed away for 18 months because she'd asked him to. She thought about the scholarship she couldn't trace, about the new free clinic that had opened in her old neighborhood in Lagos 6 months ago, funded by an anonymous donor. About the changes she'd read about in news articles about Korean organized crime, territories being divested, illegal operations being shut down, money flowing toward legitimate businesses. She thought about the way he'd looked at her from across the graduation hall, not as the dragon of soul, not as a criminal mastermind, but as a man who'd found something worth changing for and had actually done the work to change. Rose pulled out her phone and stared at the number for a long moment. Then she typed, "Coffee? Same diner as last time, but this time you're buying. And I expect the truth from the very beginning." The response came within seconds. "I wouldn't have it any other way. Tomorrow, 7 p.m.? Rose smiled, feeling something that might have been hope or might have been foolishness or might have been the beginning of something entirely new. "See you there," she typed. "And Jihoon, don't be late."
The diner looked exactly the same as it had that rainy night 18 months ago. Same flickering neon signs, same plastic tables, same smell of coffee and fried food. But this time, when Rose walked in, the man waiting for her wasn't wearing thrift store clothes or pretending to be someone he wasn't. Jihoon, and she had to think of him as Jihoon now, not Giwon, stood when he saw her, probably been waiting for an hour to make sure he wouldn't be late. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi," she replied. They sat down across from each other, and for a moment neither spoke. Then Jihoon pulled out his wallet, a simple leather one, worn but real, and placed it on the table between them. "No tricks this time," he said. "I really do have money to pay for dinner. Not millions anymore, but enough. I've been working as a business consultant.